It's time again to get your Bibles, gather your family together. Let's begin Fabric of Family.
How do you explain? How do you describe?
In Him, all families are blessed. Join our discussion on Fabric of Family.
In times past, Fabric of Family has addressed a lot of different demographics in order to cover important needs of each and every family represented. In today's program, we're going to specifically talk about matters related to finances that are particularly relevant to those who often fall within the 18 to 25-year-old category. I'm going to be speaking with two gentlemen in our panel discussion today who work with college students on a weekly basis and have a very good feel for some of the special challenges that young adults are facing today. But before we go over to the studio and talk with these men, I think you'll enjoy this brief segment by a young man named Michael Clark, whom I happen to have known all of his life. But his segment is entitled Lessons from a Park Bench, and today he's going to talk about Noah, the man of God.
Hello and welcome to Lessons from a Park Bench. I'm Michael Clark, I'm your host for this show, and today we're going to talk about Don't You Know About Noah. Now Noah was a just man. He was righteous in the eyes of the Lord. According to Genesis chapter 6 and verse 8, he found grace in the eyes of the Lord. Can it be said of you that you find grace in the eyes of the Lord in your daily walk with God? Are you doing all that Noah did? Are you being faithful? We want to look at 3 points today of why Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. Number one, Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord because he was a faithful man. Genesis chapter 6 and verse 8 states that. According to verse 9, he walked with God. And his family was walking with God. Now, why would a man that was faithful be so significant? The Bible's themed around men that are faithful. Well, that's because Noah was a man that was faithful in a time when everything was evil around him. According to verses 1 and verse 2 of Genesis chapter 6, the entire earth was evil. Only Noah and his family were the ones that were doing the things that were right. So we know that Noah was a faithful man according to Genesis chapter 6, verses 8 and 9. Number two, we know that Noah had a faithful family at the time of the flood. Now we know later on in the Bible his family did some things that weren't right, but at the time of the flood, Noah had a faithful family. Genesis 7 and verse 7 says that God allowed his family to enter the ark. Why would God allow members of a family to enter the ark if they weren't faithful, if they weren't doing God's commandments? He wouldn't. The rest of the earth was going to be destroyed and God would make an exception for one man's family only if they were doing what was right. So we know that he had a faithful family. We know that he was faithful and he had a faithful family. And number three, Noah did all that God said and obeyed without question. Now that's very significant because today there are a lot of people that are told things that they need to do but aren't willing to do them. Now we're not going to look at them, but in Genesis chapter 6, verse 13 through 21, we're only going to look at a few of those verses, but they're the specifications of what God wanted the ark to be made out of and what He wanted the length, breadth, and height to be made out. Now, number one, the type of wood that God specified was very important. It was gopher wood, according to chapter 6 and verse 14. Would any other type of wood work? No. Number two, the length was 300 cubits. Would any other length work? No. Number three, the breadth was 50 cubits. Would any other breadth work? No. Number four, the height was 30 cubits. Would any other height work? No. And finally, the animals that were supposed to be on the ark, 2 of each kind, male and female. Now that's important because that signifies that male and female is important to God. That lets us know that marriage is important because if He specified it with animals, why wouldn't He also specify it with men? So we know that Noah was a faithful man, he had a faithful family, and he listened to what God said. Can it be said of you that you are like Noah? I want to thank you for watching Lessons from a Park Bench, and see you next time.
A couple of weeks ago, I had two guests with me, Josh Webster and Danny Pettis. If you saw the program, you might remember them, but we were talking about some of the challenges that face young adults today, and specifically those who fall within that college age group. I have with me again Danny Pettis and Josh Webster. There was a lot of other information that we wanted to explore that I think will be beneficial and useful to those who are watching the program today. And so we wanted to have this opportunity to talk with you again. Maybe some, though, didn't see that program, and we want to take a moment before we get into that discussion to just allow you to tell us a little bit about you and what you've been involved with, anything about your family that you'd like to share. We'll start with Danny.
Okay, I'm Danny Pettis, and I'm director of the Christian Student Center on the campus of the University of North Alabama. Been privileged to serve there for 17 years. Have a love for campus ministry because when I was at UNA as a student, I got involved in campus ministry. I also preached for the Lexington Church of Christ in Lexington, Alabama, so I'm involved with a congregation as far as preaching and then working in campus ministry.
I'm Josh Webster. I work with Danny there at the Christian Student Center and serve as the assistant director there, and have the opportunity to work with the Shared Avenue Church with their college program there, and some other of their student ministries there as well.
All right, well, it's good to have you both back with us again.
Thank you.
And we're going to be talking about college-age students and finances, and I know that's an important topic for a lot of families and a lot of young adults, especially those who are making this major transition in their life and going from living at home to perhaps living on a college campus. And so I want to raise this question because no doubt there are some who have college students who are watching this program, or maybe some who are in college at this time. And one of the major issues that confronts so many of these students is finances. And particularly college tuition. I mean, it seems like it's going up and up and up and up every time you turn around. So based upon your work with the Student Center, what are some things you're seeing as far as how students are able to finance their education today?
You raise a very good question. Finances have always been an issue for college students, and students have always worked, but over the years, I'm observing more students are working either part-time and some even full-time jobs to be able to stay in school. We hear students saying, you know, I really want to graduate and not have a huge debt to start out with. And so they work as many hours as they can to, you know, keep that debt at a minimum. So I think that brings up an issue for college students because they want to devote time to their studies, but sometimes they're working 30, 40 hours a week. We like their involvement with the Christian Student Center, but even more important than that, they need to be involved in a local congregation. And there are just so many hours in the day, so many hours in the week, and some of them sort of fall victim to that schedule, don't they, Josh?
Absolutely, absolutely do. And, you know, our universities today, 4 years is not enough time to finish a degree program. You just can't do it in 4 years. It's taken most students now 5 years to do that, and with that extra time and going to school, it costs more today.
Is that because there are more course requirements, or is it because students are not able to dedicate themselves to their studies like perhaps they were in the past due to finances?
Well, it might be a combination of a lot of different things. You know, being on the semester system and the swap over years ago may have helped with some of that. It's just we're kind of in a different time now when it comes to education. It's going to take more time and more money to get through these degree programs.
What are your observations as to how college students approach stewardship? And I know we're speaking in general terms, but what are your thoughts about that?
Well, some probably are pretty well prepared. They have seen their parents practicing good Christian stewardship in the home. But then some do not have those personal skills yet. They're still learning how to manage their own money. It's easy to spend what you make. And if that's sort of the way it's been in the home and parents always gave the money to the student, whatever they needed to buy or wanted to buy, some of those students are sort of careless with their money and they can get into some trouble. But if they've been put on a budget at home and maybe the parents have had a family budget and maybe the student worked even part-time in the summers or even going to high school, they are beginning to learn how to take care of that money.
Sure, yeah. And I think most of the students that we encounter all are good-hearted, benevolent individuals when they have the money to do that. And it seems to me, just from observing and watching these students, their stewardship and their benevolence seems to be directly tied to the level of connection they feel to a local church. And
so you would emphasize, I'm sure, to parents as well as college students, the importance not only of being associated with the good folks at a good Christian student center, but most importantly, with a good, solid local congregation in that town.
Absolutely, and Danny and I agree, and we convey this message. The student center is not a church.
It's not, it's not a replacement.
No, it's not.
No,
It's
not intended to be.
And we're a supplement, and we want to be that supplement. We want to provide that supplementation. But every single student that comes to a state campus needs to find a local congregation. They need to plug into that congregation, and they need to be involved. And that's going to help them in their stewardship as well.
Well, you think about it, some students are tempted to just sort of visit, or we call it church hop. If you visit several churches, and in our area in Florence, Alabama, there are so many congregations, and several offer good college ministries, and so they can sort of do it, sort of like a buffet line, and go through and pick, and pick and choose from the different congregations without making the commitment that Josh is talking about. And so a congregation will be stronger if it has these young adults working within the congregation, but it'll be a blessing for the student to be committed, and then even from these part-time jobs, beginning to purpose and to give from their resources to the church. They feel connection to that local church.
Well, you were talking about just a moment ago how that students who are in college are facing some extraordinary financial challenges. How does this have an effect upon their spiritual life?
I think it's huge. I think it's humongous. And I think it comes really down to the time. Because of the financial strain and because of having to work extra time, they just don't have the time to devote in the areas that are truly important.
So how does a student balance their life? I mean, again, I know we're speaking in generalities, but how does a student learn to balance their work responsibilities with their studies at the university, along with their involvement with a local church? I'm sure that's got to be very challenging with all of the stresses that are placed upon students at colleges today.
Well, some of it can come from the Christian Student Center. We can address it in one-on-one settings and even in a class setting, and we have done that. But fortunately, the university also offers that kind of guidance too, because they have time management classes, and they help particularly with like new students, freshmen coming in. They actually do some sessions with the students about study time, work time, social time, finding that balance. So it's not all just from the Christian Student Center or the local congregation. Some of those skills can be learned and developed on the campus.
I'm sure is that an elective that's taught by the university, or is that just kind of a workshop format on budgeting?
Well, like in the orientation aspect, and it's not for credit classes, but those are available, and I'm sure at any state university they would be available as well.
Yeah, and I think it's important too to emphasize the continued role of a parent in the life of a college student.
Right.
Even after they leave, make sure that you keep tabs on the student and what they're doing, what they're involved in, not just what their grades are, but where are they spending their time, what kind of people are they around, because all of those things play back into the spirituality of that young person, but also it's good indicators of finances and how well they're doing with those finances as well too.
Well, certainly when a young person goes off to college, goes off to a university, that's a very, very critical time in their life. And there are other very important transitions or stages that we go through in life as well. But why is it such an important time in their life as far as molding them and making them and finishing them into the kind of young adult that they want to be?
Well, they're at that crossroads. They're becoming adults, and they're entering the adult world, and to a large extent being treated as adults for the first time, and they have that power to choose. And a lot of those choices that were made for them at home, now they're making on their own. And so I think it's just being at this point of life that you begin to say, not only can I make the choices, but I become responsible for the choices that I make. There will always be consequences. You know, there'll be the good things when we make good choices, and there'll be some negative consequences if we make the wrong choice.
Well, Danny and Josh, we're going to take just a break here, and we're going to watch a segment, Word for the Family, and then we'll be back to continue our discussion with Danny Pettis and Josh Webster in just a moment. Thank you.
Glory, hallelujah. Hey, praise God Jehovah. Amen. Amen. Amen.
Mark Twain once defined civilization as a limitless multiplication of unnecessary necessities. It would be difficult to deny that we are threatened by things when we consider that 100 years ago the average citizen had 72 wants and rated only 16 of the 72 as necessities. In contrast, the average citizen today has 484 wants, with 94 of them considered necessities. Is America being consumed by consumption? Of course, not all things are bad. 1 Timothy 6:17 reminds us that God gives us richly all things to enjoy. However, God's Word warns that things can threaten our souls. John warns, "Do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him." The solution to the problem of things is found in seeking those things which are above, as Paul admonished in Colossians 3:1 and 2. I'm Jim Dearman with another 1-minute walk on the pathway to peace.
Hope you enjoyed that segment of A Word for the Family. And we're back with Danny Pettis and Josh Webster, and we're continuing our discussion of some of the money challenges, financial challenges, that young adults have to face in their life. I want us to think about now some of the special financial challenges that maybe a young couple is going to have to face as well, some of the pitfalls that are out there. Because, you know, a lot of times we think about college students, we do think about maybe single individuals, but there are many young married couples who are also involved in universities and taking classes, working on their degrees. And so what do you think are some of the money pitfalls that a young couple may have to face today?
Well, it probably goes back to selfishness. You know, a lot of our problems in life, we can trace all of them back to selfishness. And I think, as we were discussing earlier, that transition from high school into college and adulthood, a lot of times they're only thinking about themselves. And so if you carry a selfish attitude into marriage, that's not going to work too well. And so...
and selfish in respect to finances, how?
Well, just maybe an impulsive purchase of something, not discussing with the wife or the husband an item that you want, and it may put you in debt. I've seen this happen a few times, and you know, the husband has spent too much money, and he comes home and he talks to the wife. She said, "You bought what?" and suddenly we got this debt. And credit card buying, that's the trap, because with the plastic you can buy some of those things that you do not have the cash for. And so running up a large credit card debt becomes a real problem and an issue for some of the young couples.
Sure it does. And one thing we see a good bit is students that have decided they want to be married or get engaged, and so we participate in premarital counseling with a lot of students, and one of the things we always cover very early on is budgets and money, and try to show them, you know, that if it doesn't work on paper, it's not going to work in reality, and how important it is to have a good budget, and how it helps you in your spiritual life as well, you know, to be able to budget everything out, even how much you're going to give to the church on Sunday.
Well, that's a great thing that y'all are involved with. Premarital counseling, as we've emphasized on this program many times, is so very, very, very important. What role do you think that parents fulfill as far as imparting these life lessons that are taught within the home concerning finances?
Probably just the example, the role model, because I think we all begin to imitate what we have seen from our own parents. If the parents have been careful and maybe have been open in discussing finances with their son or daughter, when they begin to have to manage their own money, then the student has some understanding of there will have to be some choices and maybe even sacrifices. And I can't always have everything I want just when I want it. Sometimes you have to wait, be patient and wait for some of those things to come along. So parents can show patience and model restraint in purchasing things or managing their own money.
Mm-hmm. Something we try also to stress on this program is the power of parental influence.
Sure.
And I'm just curious as to what your thoughts are as to how early in life do you think it's important that parents start teaching children to be financially responsible?
I don't think it's never too early. At my house, we have a 3-year-old and we have a 7-year-old, and we even try at these early ages to teach them the responsibility of money, that if you want something, you have to work to make the money to buy it, and then even at that, you still have to budget, that kind of money, what you're going to do with it. So from a parent standpoint, I don't think it's ever too early. And from an observation standpoint, from working with students and young people for a number of years, a parent's involvement as early as possible is absolutely paramount. They must be involved as early as possible to give those good Christian examples.
So if a parent has a talk with their young daughter or young man who's getting ready to go off into college for the first time, we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about finances, because I know this is going to be important as you leave the home. They've really waited too long, haven't they?
Way too long.
Yes.
Each of our children should be given opportunity to manage money. Like Josh said, starting with his children at an early age. They need to know where the money came from and the responsibility of taking care of that money. And we can't emphasize too much, regardless of the age of the child, the young adult in college, give back to God. Everything we have comes from God, and we don't really own anything. He's just allowing us to use these things temporarily. And so we give God first, and then we balance everything else out.
Well, do you think that's a problem for college students in general, as they're beginning to live on their own, to also include stewardship as far as their contribution, their giving to the Lord, since they could reason say, well, I'm in college, I'm having to take out a loan for my education, therefore I'm exempt from this.
I think for some, more than for others, and I think that's tied directly back to, does the college student feel a connection in a local congregation? From where we are at the University of North Alabama, we see college students from different places, but a lot of these students can travel back home in a short amount of time, and so they still feel some sort of connection back home, but they're not home all the time, and so they tend to be at one place, one congregation one week, another congregation next week. And so I think, yes, it is an issue for some, and I think it's directly tied to whether or not they feel a connection in the local congregation or not.
Okay, so you have these two college students who are married, a man and a woman. Whose responsibility is it to make sure that the home is financially stable? What would you say?
It's got to be a partnership. I think probably one or the other will be a better financial manager. Some of the counseling that I've done, usually you can identify within those two who really can manage the money, keep up with the checking account and that kind of thing. But there has to be communication. I think the husband and wife needs to talk about, where our money is going and staying by that budget, following through consistently on a family budget, but each having a part in setting that budget.
I'm sure in your premarital counseling that you do, and perhaps even in counseling single individuals, when you talk about budgets, you begin to ask them to fill out various categories that come to mind as far as how much money they would want to allot to this or that. Do you find that students tend to be surprised when they start trying to sort all of this out as far as what they have to be responsible for that they didn't realize?
Absolutely, absolutely. Especially when they're leaving college and they're about to be out on their own, and the money from mom and dad is not there anymore, and there's just not enough money left at the end of the month, so they can be very, very shocked, very surprised by some of this.
Well, even a few students, and this would not be a majority, but a few students that we see actually could still be living at home with family, but they choose to move out. They'll move into an apartment, a shared apartment with some other students. And all of a sudden, they're spending all the money that they're making at these part-time jobs on rent and food and maybe gas for their car, and they're not showing any profit. There's no money in savings or anything because they're finding out it takes a lot of money to live. And so young couples, you can sort of double that because some really do not understand the total cost of just getting by.
I remember, just from a personal note, talking with one of my children. I have 4. 2 of them are grown and each have a child. But I remember talking on one occasion, and they were expressing a desire to be on their own when they got out of high school. We said, okay, well, how much is this going to cost you? And they began to say, well, I think I can do it for this. And then I said, okay, now what about things such as power and water? How much are you going to budget for that? And the response was, you mean we have to pay for that?
It can be a shock. It can be a surprise.
Yes, you do have to pay for it. Well, very quickly, our time's almost gone, but what are some practical ways you think that parents can teach children of different ages the importance of being financially responsible?
I think you've got to give them the opportunity. You've got to put money in their hand, find a way for them to work, to earn money, and then show them how to properly use that.
Temptation is to bail them out if they get in trouble. Sometimes they may need to suffer a little bit from mismanaging their money, and so we learn painful lessons that way.
Well, this has been a great discussion. Thank you for coming back and being with us again. I know that the things we've talked about are going to be helpful.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, our time has quickly gotten away from us today, hasn't it? But before we go, let me just thank you for taking time out of your busy day to think about these important family issues. There are 3 God-given institutions, and the home is one of these 3. You see, the home matters. And at the Jackson Heights Church of Christ in Florence, Alabama, we firmly believe that the family is important to the spiritual and physical well-being of all people. And so until next time, for the Jackson Heights Church of Christ in Florence, Alabama, Sane Video Productions and the Gospel Broadcasting Network, I'm Barry Gilreath Jr., wishing you and your family a blessed week.